Chapter 8. Trials of the Void. The vastness of space is deceptive. It promises infinity, but delivers trials that test the very limits of one's soul. As the small, sleek starship, piloted by Captain Rennick, sliced through the cosmic sea, its interior was a hive of tense activity. Corin stood by the viewing port, his silver eyes reflecting the star-studded blackness outside. Emily was beside him, her gaze occasionally flicking his way, a silent question in her eyes about the enormity of the universe and their place within it. Captain Rennick's voice cut through the quiet. "Approaching the nebular fields," he announced, his tone a blend of caution and thrill. "Keep sharp. Pirates love these clouds as cubs love a game of hide-and-seek." Corin turned from the window, his mind aligning with the mission. The nebular fields, a vast, swirling mass of interstellar gas and dust, loomed ahead, their colors shifting eerily like the surface of a soap bubble. The ship eased into the nebula, and the light from the stars struggled to penetrate the dense fog. "Visuals are going to be compromised," Rennick grumbled, adjusting the sensors. "We'll need to rely on instruments and instincts." It wasn't long before those instincts were tested. An alarm trilled sharply, and the ship shuddered as if grasping for stability. "Contacts! Multiple signals detected," shouted Jax, the navigator, his fingers dancing over the holographic controls. Pirates, hidden within the nebula's cloak, had lain in wait and now sprung their trap. Their ships, smaller, faster, and more agile, darted from the mist like spectral wolves. "Battle stations," Rennick commanded, his voice a steel thread in the tense air. Emily rushed to assist with the ship's defensive systems, her earlier training sessions flashing through her mind in vivid detail. Corin felt his heart hammering in his chest as he reached out with his telepathy, trying to get a sense of the pirates' intentions. Anger, greed, and excitement flooded through him, a chaotic symphony of malice that was almost overwhelming. He gritted his teeth, focusing on pushing these invasive emotions aside to maintain clarity of thought. The first volley of plasma fire grazed their shields, lighting up the ship's surroundings with a ghostly glow. "Shields at 76%, Jax reported, worry creasing his brow. Rennick maneuvered the ship with a seasoned hand, diving, weaving, and retaliating with precise bursts of return fire. Corin, meanwhile, used his abilities to predict the pirates' next moves, a whisper of thought here, a nudge of intention there, guiding Rennick's actions. "This one's planning a flank," Corin called out, his voice calm despite the pounding of his heart. "2 clicks to the right, Captain." With a sharp nod, Rennick adjusted their course, the ship banking hard to the side, just as a barrage of fire sliced through the space they had occupied moments before. Emily worked furiously at the defense console, deploying countermeasures that spewed clouds of metallic chaff to confuse the pirate sensors. "We can't keep this up forever," she shouted over the din, her voice edged with strain. "We won't have to," Rennick assured her, his eyes on the swirling battle displayed on the main screen. "Corin, anything you can do?" Reaching out again with his mind, Corin felt the chaotic thoughts of the pirates mingling with fear as their initial confidence waned. He seized on this, amplifying their doubts, their fears of failure. The confusion began to spread, subtle but effective, sowing disarray among the pirates. As their formation broke, Rennick seized the opportunity. "Now, Jax, full power to forward shields and guns." The ship surged forward, its main cannon firing a concentrated beam of energy that pierced through the nebula. One pirate ship exploded in a silent, brilliant flash, and the others scattered, their morale broken. The crew of the starship allowed themselves a moment of relieved laughter as the last of the pirate ships retreated, disappearing back into the nebulous haze. "Nicely done, team," Rennick said, clapping Corin on the shoulder with a grin. "Couldn't have done it without your head magic, Corin." As the adrenaline faded, Corin looked out into the void, his thoughts heavy. The universe was indeed infinite, he realized, not just in space, but in the challenges it presented. Yet today, they had overcome, together. Chapter 9. Confronting the Slavers. The black of space was like a sea of possibilities, some darker than others. As Corin's ship, the starbound Spirit, glided silently towards the shadowy asteroid belt, a palpable tension hung in the cramped cockpit. Captain Rennick's fingers danced over the luminescent controls, each tap syncing with the pulsing lights that guided them through the cosmos. Emily stood beside Corin, her eyes reflecting the starlight that seeped through the viewport, mirroring the resolve and fear mingling in her gaze. "They've nested in the belly of Thrawn 7, Captain Rennick murmured, his voice a low rumble over the hum of the engine. "A desolate rock, perfect for those who shun the light." Corin's hands clenched at his sides. The asteroid was a known haven for outlaws, a place where the law's arm seldom reached, and justice even less so. He knew that here, in the void, his powers of telepathy would be both a boon and a burden. The silent screams of past victims seemed to echo through the void, reaching out to him. As they approached the asteroid, the ship's scanners flickered with interference. "Jamming devices," Emily noted, her voice steady despite the flicker of concern in her eyes. "We'll go dark," Captain Rennick decided, shutting down the non-essential systems, cloaking them in the asteroid's shadow. The cabin plunged into near darkness, lit only by the emergency strips on the floor. Corin felt Emily's hand brush against his, a silent pact of reassurance between them. The starbound Spirit touched down in a craggy gorge, the rocky walls providing cover. The trio suited up in silence, each movement deliberate, aware that any sound could betray their presence to the slavers lurking in the tunnels beneath their feet. "Keep your comms open. Use whispers only," Captain Rennick instructed as he handed out the earpieces. They entered the tunnels, the lights on their suits casting eerie shadows against the jagged walls. Corin led, his senses extended outward, feeling for the minds of their foes. The mental signatures were a jumble of cruelty and greed, so entangled that distinguishing one from another was like trying to untie a Gordian knot. As they delved deeper, the air grew thick with the stench of ionized energy and fear. A faint light glowed from around a bend, and Corin motioned for the others to halt. Peering around the corner, he saw them, guards clad in mismatched armor, lazily watching a hollow screen. Their minds were dull with boredom, a weakness. Corin retreated back to his team. "2 guards, not expecting trouble. We can take them quietly," he whispered, his voice a mere breath. Emily nodded, pulling a compact stun gun from her belt. Together with Captain Rennick, they rounded the corner, moving with practiced silence. Before the guards could react, they were down, slumped against the wall. With the path clear, they proceeded to the holding cells. The corridor was lined with doors, each sealed with a biometric lock. Corin felt a surge of anger and pity as he passed each one, the faint echoes of despair brushing against his mind. Finally, they reached the cell holding Corin's siblings. The lock beeped softly, disengaging under Captain Rennick's skilled hands. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit room where Corin's siblings huddled together, their eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. "Corin," one whispered, her voice trembling. "It's me. We're getting you out of here," Corin replied, stepping into the cell to embrace them. Their minds touched his, a cacophony of relief and joy that almost overwhelmed him. But there was no time for long reunions. Not yet. As they led the escape, the alarm finally blared, the sound deafening in the narrow corridors. They ran, a desperate sprint towards freedom, the slavers hot on their heels. Gunfire echoed behind them as they neared the ship. Captain Rennick fired back, providing cover as Emily helped Corin's siblings aboard. Corin paused at the ramp, turning to face their pursuers. He reached out with his mind, a pulse of sheer will, pushing the slavers back, their confusion buying them precious seconds. With a final glance at the chaos he had sown, Corin boarded the ship, the doors sealing shut with a satisfying thud. The starbound Spirit lifted off, leaving Thrawn 7 and its dark secrets behind, a trail of stardust marking their path to freedom. As they ascended, Corin looked at his siblings, their faces bathed in starlight, and for the first time in a long while, he dared to hope. Chapter 10. Battle for Freedom. The chilling void of space cloaked the Star Wisp as it hovered in silent orbit around a desolate asteroid, which harbored the Slavers' fortress, a jagged structure of steel and obsidian, cutting through the darkness like a wound in the fabric of the night. Corin peered through the reinforced viewport, his eyes reflecting a mosaic of stars, his mind a whirlwind of strategy and fear. "Are we ready?" Captain Rennick's voice was a low rumble, reverberating through the ship's cramped command center. Corin nodded, his throat tight. "We're ready." Beside him, Emily squeezed his hand, her presence a comforting warmth against the cold anticipation that filled the air. They had planned this for weeks, poring over blueprints and guard schedules, calculating every possible outcome. Yet, as the moment of action drew near, the weight of uncertainty bore down on Corin's shoulders, like the gravity of a black hole. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom or vengeance. He was fighting for his family, for the siblings whose faces haunted his dreams. The operation began with the silent grace of a nebula drifting across the cosmos. The Star Wisp's stealth mode was a marvel of engineering, allowing them to approach the asteroid undetected. As they docked in the shadowed crevice of the fortress, Corin's heart was a drum of war in his chest. "Go! Go! Go!" Captain Rennick's command cut through the tension, and the team disembarked with military precision, moving through the metallic corridors with ghostly silence. Corin led the way, his senses heightened, every whisper of sound, every shift in the air read like the pages of an open book through his telepathic abilities. They reached the detention block without incident, the corridor ahead lit by the intermittent flicker of faulty lighting. The doors were fortified, but nothing their tech specialist, Jara, couldn't handle. Sparks flew as she manipulated the locking mechanisms, her brow furrowed in concentration. The door hissed open, revealing rows of cells, each a small, stark square of despair. Corin's heart skipped as he saw them, thin, haggard figures, shadows of the vibrant souls they once were. His siblings. "It's me, Corin," he called softly, not wanting to startle them. Recognition flared in their eyes, followed by tears, as he opened each cell, embracing them one by one. But the reunion was cut short by the blare of alarms. They had been discovered. "We need to move now!" Emily shouted over the chaos, her voice a beacon of urgency. What followed was a blur of motion and adrenaline. They fought their way back towards the ship, confronting guards armed with energy rifles. Corin was everywhere at once, defending, leading, his telepathic abilities guiding his actions, reading opponents' moves before they made them. Emily was by his side, fierce and unyielding, her training under Captain Rennick shining through in every precise, lethal move she made. The climax came as they neared the docking bay. There, in the cold metallic expanse, stood the slavers' leader, a towering figure clad in armor that gleamed like a star gone rogue. "You think you can steal from me?" His voice boomed, carrying the weight of dark suns. Corin stepped forward, his siblings behind him, a united front of defiance. "We're not your property. We never were," he declared, his voice resonant with newfound strength. The battle that ensued was titanic, an epic clash that would echo through the corridors of the fortress, like the roar of a supernova. Energy blasts lit the darkness, casting stark shadows as they fought. Corin was relentless, pushing forward, fueled by years of pain and the burning need for freedom. In the end, it was his telepathy that turned the tide. Sensing a momentary doubt in the slaver's mind, Corin struck, disarming him with a swift, precise movement. The leader was defeated, his reign of terror ended by the very beings he had sought to oppress. As they made their escape, the Star Wisp breaking away from the asteroid with the roar of liberated engines, Corin looked back at the shrinking fortress, a symbol of their victory and a promise of a new beginning. The stars ahead were bright, their light not just illuminating the vastness of space, but also the path to a future filled with hope.